Hello everyone and welcome back to the Bewarecast. I hope you're well. In this video, we'll be going back to some of the classics, some older videos of mine, and looking at a few weird worlds with even weirder creatures inhabiting them. The media covered in this hour-and-a-half video will include film, comic books, literature, and more. I do very much hope that you enjoy this blast from the past, but before we get started, I'd like to ask that you please hit the like button, as it really helps out with getting the channel recommended. I'd also like to ask that you join my Patreon if you're feeling generous, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's get into it. Within a vast alien marketplace, in the so-called slave arena on the planet Oberdos, we meet the last human being in existence. He was the captain of the International Space Station, and was on board when Earth was destroyed by an alien race known as the Succubi during a campaign of conquest and destruction known as the Great Terror. The ISS was blasted out of the Earth's orbit by the shockwaves of Earth's destruction, and his fellow astronauts were all killed. He and what was left of the space station drifted through the void until it was picked up by alien scavengers. While in the slave arena, this last human, among many other captured alien lifeforms, is subjected to close inspection by those who are in the market for servants, labourers, gladiators, or lovers. The last man, however, wouldn't become any of these things, because shortly after being spotted by a potential alien buyer and talking shit directly to his face, this happened. And in that moment, this universe officially became a post-human one. Humanity would be avenged though, as would countless other species wiped out during the Great Terror by a mysterious, brutal and unforgiving entity known only as Shakara. I will avoid spoilers where possible, but I should warn you now that this video will contain some spoilers with regards to the main character's physiology and biology, so if you'd rather read the story for yourself first, now would be the time to stop watching this video. I will now tell you all about the universe that Shakara inhabits. The character was first seen within the pages of the weekly publication 2000 AD, a long-running magazine whose headquarters are based in my homeland, England. Many of you will know 2000 AD is the home of everyone's favourite judge, jury and executioner, Judge Dredd. Shakara was co-created by writer Robbie Morrison and artist Henry Flint. The story began all the way back in 2001 and concluded in 2011. It has now been collected into two trade paperbacks, Shakara the Avenger and Shakara the Destroyer. The main character, to begin with, is a mystery. Its name comes from the one and only word that it says before it makes a kill. It's an alien species that appears to be the last of its species, much like the unfortunate human mentioned earlier. It's clad in a metal suit, and its only discernible facial features are its two bright, glowing red eyes. It has spikes sticking out of its head, arms and torso. On its right hand it has a laser weapon, and on its right a sort of jagged pincer. It has a long chain or chains wrapped around its neck for protection. The whole outfit looks as though it was pieced together using found debris. This being is undoubtedly a killing machine, driven purely by rage and vengeance for its fallen people, and for other species throughout the galaxy that have been destroyed. Just after the last human is killed, he is immediately on the scene, slaughtering the perpetrator and others within the vicinity who would do harm to the captive lifeforms within the slave arena. The Shakara is said to be the last surviving member of its species, and with some twists and turns throughout the story, which I won't spoil here, we get to find out what this strange, vengeful being's true purpose is, and the true reason its people were destroyed. But the Shakara isn't the only strange being to inhabit this world. The Hierarchy, an alliance of different alien species, all hostile toward our protagonist and all complicit in the Great Terror, are the ones of whom vengeance is sought. They come in a variety of different striking forms. I'll go through a selection of the most notable ones here, but to get the full experience I highly recommend getting the two graphic novels for yourself. The first are the Krolls. These are the first alien species that we see Shakara dispense justice upon, and by that I mean exterminate. The Krolls have a very interesting and unique design, in that when their leaders are gathered together within their floating capitol building or whatever it is, they each ensconce themselves within long gaps that run along the walls of the building. They're creepy. They seem to have a sort of insectish appearance and lifestyle. They're in the process of attempting to extort an insane amount of money from a less advanced race, known as the Silurians, who need to escape from their sun, which is going supernova. The Krolls control the wormhole technology in this quadrant and have decided to renegotiate their payment with the Silurians. This is when the Shakara breaks through the Krolls' defences with his ship and starts to slaughter them, and rightfully so. They engage him using cyber tendrils, but they provide little resistance against him. He then sabotages the ship's control system, aims their ship towards a nearby black hole, and that's the last we see of the Krolls. The Zorn Empire belongs to the hierarchy also, and is led by a bloodthirsty, monstrous warlord named Skulker, who delights in annihilating entire civilizations. By the point that we meet him in the story, however, he's beginning to grow weary of what he does. He's bored, and has been ever since the apparent genocide of the most feared race in the galaxy, the Shakarans. Nothing seems to excite him anymore. That is, until the Shakara makes an appearance when the warlord is in the process of wiping out a lesser advanced race called the Hydroxians, and this reignites Warlord Skulker's passion for conflict. This would of course be the last conflict that Skulker would engage in, as, well, he's a bad guy and Shakara is the protagonist, so naturally he has to die, along with the rest of the genocidal Zorn Empire. The Psycho Alliance is made up of telepathic beings that possess a skinny, humanoid body and a giant floating eyeball for a head. These beings, while not as deadly as the Succubi, are quite possibly the most sadistic of all hierarchy member species. They're easily the most intelligent and the most wicked, taking great delight in the destruction of less advanced worlds and species. An individual by the name of Oberon Sneer, master investigator of the Psychos, is the one to give Shakara the most grief over the course of the story. He does meet his end, in the end, but to avoid serious spoilers, I won't reveal anything about that here. This species can all use their telepathic abilities to merge into a, quote, brainstorming fleet of mind morphs. They are indeed extremely deadly. Up next are the Technosaurs, who I have to say are my personal favourite. They're basically just various kinds of dinosaurs and pterosaurs, but intelligent and sapient, capable of speech. They all have some kind of mechanical apparatus on their heads and other parts of their bodies, which I believe is what grants them their intelligence, though this isn't stated outright in the story. They are evil, of course, being a member race of the hierarchy, but they don't seem quite as intelligent as the other species. They seem to serve as comic relief more than anything, but not through any sort of stupidity, but more from the sheer absurdity of having talking dinosaurs engage in normal conversations. And lastly, we have the Succubi, and depending on the point of view you choose to take, these could be the most evil of all the hierarchy beings, or the least. These are the beings responsible for the destruction of Earth at the beginning of the story. The Succubi, as the graphic novel states within its pages, are, quote, without doubt one of the deadliest races you will encounter within these pages. Insectoid beings of sentient plasma, the Succubi prey upon the less civilized galaxies, draining energy from their target worlds and leaving them as little more than lifeless husks. Succubi ships bombard their targets with incredible firepower, triggering a world-shattering chain reaction. The energies released by the planetary death throes are then absorbed by the Apocalypse Core, the power source of the ships. The Succubi, bio-linked directly to the mainframe of their ships, feed upon the trapped energy like vampires upon a gushing corpse. End quote. And that's from the Encyclopedia Intergalactica, edition 2000. Yes, they destroy worlds for sustenance. Horrible from our perspective, completely normal from theirs. At least they seem to do it for a somewhat understandable reason though. The others, like the previously mentioned Psychos, just seem to commit genocide because it's fun. These were of course just a handful of species from this incredible work of comic book science fiction. I've left out a lot of stuff, including things related to the Red Death, the characters of Lara and Eva Procopio, the memoirs of Valentine Diath, a pretty badass assassin character, and who the main villain, the big bad of the story really is. To be perfectly honest, it's not often that I read comics anymore. I used to be very much a DC guy, but their output over the last 5 years or so has been mostly garbage. Shakara though was a joy to read. I found it while trying to find something new and interesting to talk about on the channel, and after looking at a few titles that came up when I googled graphic novels with aliens, I decided to buy the digital versions of the 2 installments and read through the whole story. I loved everything about it. The artist Henry Flint was apparently given free rein to design absolutely everything in this book however he wanted it, and you can tell that he had a hell of a fun time doing so. Robbie Morrison has written something pretty special here as well. I wasn't aware of him or his work before, but he seems to have worked on quite a few different titles for 2000 AD, and has even worked in the US writing a Spider-Man title for Marvel. Not something I'm really into, but still an interesting piece of trivia. I'll definitely be looking into reading more of his stuff now that I've found him though. Rogue planet. Noun. A celestial body not bound to a star, expelled from the planetary system in which they formed. Abandoned. A deep space salvage vessel, the Cortez, makes its way towards a rogue planet named Lonely Orphan. Its crew, comprised of 8 members, are in hypersleep, a period known as ZOM time, where their basic motor functions and thinking abilities can be used to perform small, simple tasks. Most of this time, however, is spent inside of their designated pods, unconscious. The crew of the Cortez are heading towards this desolate world because a signal has been picked up, and there is also the prospect of a massive payload. A world such as this one is commonly littered with scrap, and provides a golden opportunity for salvagers. When they are close to reaching Lonely Orphan, the crew are roused from their slumber to begin preparations for entering the rogue planet's orbit. What they find upon waking is rather strange. It's snowing on board their ship. At first, it's theorized by the ship's mechanic, Nate Franco, that a problem with the onboard environmental systems has occurred. He is ordered by the ship's captain, Joel Norris, to get it fixed ASAP. Captain Norris is a man not fond of surprises. The medical officer, Gloria Enright, states that during her hypersleep she dreamed of snow. This is, however, dismissed by the ship's pilot, Sean Isaacs, who states that nobody dreams during ZOM time. So why is this happening? Where did the snow come from? Unfortunately for the crew of the Cortez, they're about to find out that flakes of snow where there should be none are the least of their troubles in the story of Rogue Planet. Rogue Planet is a 5-book series published by Oni Press. It was written by Cullen Bunn, drawn by Andy MacDonald, and coloured by Nick Filardi. This video will cover Book 1 in the series, and will contain spoilers. As Beware the Q is a speculative evolution and biology channel, we won't be focusing too much on the story here, and will, instead, be taking a look at the alien species and other horrifying lifeforms present within the pages of the book. Most of them are quite disturbing, and they don't have names. At least, they haven't yet been given names in Book 1 of the series. Let's start with something more mild. The planet's natives. They're very humanoid in appearance. They have light greenish-blue skin and no visible hair. The eyes are large and completely black. These beings strongly resemble the grey aliens of our own UFO lore. The cranium is large, and there don't seem to be any ears or a nose, at least none that can be seen. They have, like us, 5 digits on each hand. They have 2 arms and 2 legs. They seem to be variously depicted with 3 toes on each foot, and also 5. but that's comic books for you. They seem to be in possession of some sort of drug, which takes away the fear of the being about to be sacrificed, but nothing else is revealed about it in Book 1. No doubt, more light will be shed on this later on in the series. They live on the planet Lonely Orphan, and seem to live a tribal lifestyle. They seem like nice beings at the beginning of the story, but it's not long before we find out that they're fond of sacrificing their young to their gods. Now, this is nothing we haven't seen before here on Earth, but the thing they're offering sacrifices to has, thankfully, never been seen here. It appears to be a gigantic flesh tower. It's covered with eyes, teeth and tentacles. Standard cosmic horror fare. It's unknown whether this disgusting living flesh tower is an independent being or part of a larger organism, or a part of the planet itself. Lonely Orphan is a seemingly intelligent world, one that lures spacefaring vessels in with false distress signals. It could be that the rogue planet is in fact a living planet. The flesh tower requires sacrifice, and while a small child seems to be enough for now, the child's father tells him, as he lay dying, that greater sacrifices will be made of those who the false signal beckons. On another part of the planet, the Cortez has touched down, and the crew are walking towards the origin of what they believe to be the distress signal. It's stated by one crew member that these signals are usually approximate and not exact, and so leaving the ship and walking is a necessity. The environment on Lonely Orphan is a hostile one. Razor rock, treacherous footing and poisonous vapours are everywhere. This world has no planetary system or star to call its own. It is, as stated by the native tribal alien near the beginning, a forbidden place. The crew walks for a while and comes across groups of large crystals that seem to be giving off heat. The crew are in awe of the way they glow and how they respond to touch. But it's not long before a member of the crew notices that they're being stalked, and then comes across a mass spaceship graveyard with yet more giant crystals protruding from the vast wreckage. That's when they hear what sounds like breathing, deep and loud. They venture a little further out and find the root of this unsettling noise. It's a pair of gigantic lungs, or that's what the crew takes them for. Are they the living planet's lungs? They don't attack the crew and remain stationary, continuing their loud, laboured breathing. The crew continues. Inside of a cavern, they find what looks like a warning scrawled across the walls in an alien language, seemingly the same language spoken by the natives. But then they're interrupted by a rush of strong wind and the appearance of another gigantic, monstrous being. This one is long and snake-like, the same pink flesh colour as the flesh tower, again covered with teeth and eyes. This thing is completely independent and mobile, at least it seems to be. It has an untold number of small tentacles. As it swiftly passes overhead, it grabs Jimmy, one of the crew members. It takes him, binds him with its many small wriggling appendages, and then Jimmy is gone. The crew are understandably in shock. And the shock continues to grow when the crew spots 4 figures ahead of them. They look normal enough from the neck down, but yeah. They don't attack the crew, but instead they just stand there motionless. It's theorized by the crew that these things are being used in the same manner as scarecrows. They are able to move past them. Later on, they encounter a creature that is capable of movement. A sort of giant scorpion made out of human bones and organs. It attacks the crew, but after a struggle, they're able to subdue it. In September of 2016, a gigantic creature appeared off the coast of Japan. The first visible signs of its existence were a huge cloud of steam erupting from the bay in which the creature emerged, and a leak opening in the Tokyo Bay aqua line from which a strange red liquid emerged. While mobile phone footage of the creature's long tail was captured by members of the public, the Japanese government believed the footage to be nothing more than a hoax, and that the real cause of the steam eruption from the bay and the damage to the aqua line was unusual seismic activity beneath the ocean. That was until this same footage was shown on the news, which then confirmed its validity. To begin with, biologists were brought in to identify this enormous, bizarre marine animal, but they were unable to do so. Upon examination of further captured footage, it was noted that this colossal being had both gills and fin-like legs. By this point, it was theorized that while the creature had leg-like appendages, it couldn't possibly come very far onto dry land due to its massive size. It was believed that if it did so, it would be crushed under its own weight. This, however, proved to be untrue. The creature did in fact make its way onto dry land after swimming up a river linked to the bay, destroying countless boats and bridges as it did so. Its ability to do this was a result of physiological changes that it went through prior to leaving the water. It had the ability to evolve to suit its environment, or change of environment. Upon emerging from the water and making its way ashore, the creature could be seen in its entirety for the first time. The following are descriptions of the creature based on eyewitness testimony, which has been verified. There are only 3 known forms that can be fully described, though previous forms and future forms are a certainty. These unseen forms won't be covered here, however. We'll just stick with what we know. Now, the first form was never seen in its full glory, with just the tail and its dorsal plates being visible above the water's surface. It was, however, confirmed to be serpentine with auxiliary ambulation, meaning it has gills as well as legs, as previously stated. Briefly visible was the creature's eye, which was large, round, staring and unblinking, like that of a fish. This is only natural, as up to this point it had been an aquatic animal. Its height and length cannot be verified. More information becomes available, however, upon the animal reaching its second form. At this point, it had emerged fully from the water and was now able to navigate dry land with the use of 2 large hind legs, which were, surprisingly, able to fully support the creature's weight, though it did move in a rather clumsy fashion. It stood horizontally, with its body held parallel to the ground. Its body was a yellowish-green colour with elements of light brown. The head closely resembled that of an eel shark. It had large, staring fish eyes, much like its previous form. It also had a large, gaping mouth. It had red gills which hung from its neck and expelled a red liquid substance, possibly blood, the same substance seen when the Tokyo Bay aqua line was damaged and began leaking. At the front of the body could be seen 2 stumps, which seemed to be the precursors to a set of arms, and on its back were a set of light brown dorsal plates. When measured from the end of its snout to the tip of its long tail, the second form of the creature came in at 28 meters long in total. By this point, the creature was known by the acronym GULF, Giant Unidentified Life Form. Of course, as previously stated, this was a creature of change, of constant evolution, and so it wasn't long before physiological adaptations occurred which enabled it to move around more freely on land. Its next form had an upright stance, and its forearms were slightly more developed, though still did not serve any useful function. It was almost twice as tall as it was in its previous form. Its colouring was no longer the yellowish-green that it was before, but was now a dull, dark, reddish-brown. Once again, the large, fish-like eyes were present. Its long tail ended with a fleshy ball, and its gills were now closed and much less prominent, no longer being needed. The third form was 57 meters in height and 168.25 meters in length. By the time of the creature's fourth form coming into being, it had been given an official designation, Gojira for Japanese speakers and Godzilla for English speakers. This name was created by a mysterious biologist by the name of Goro Maki, who upon being exiled from Japan in the 1950s for unknown reasons, relocated to the US and took a job with an American energy firm. It was during the course of his research while working for this company, studying life forms that had been mutated by nuclear waste dumped into the Pacific Ocean by the US, that he discovered an entirely new life form, one that had quickly adapted to the radioactive conditions. He theorized that the creature was a previously undiscovered prehistoric life form that had begun to consume the radioactive materials. He attempted to publish a paper on his findings, but the publication was blocked by his employer. He named it Gojira, which on his native Odo Island means incarnation of God. Godzilla's fourth form now stood at 118.5 meters in height and had a total length of 333 meters. It weighed 92,000 metric tons. Godzilla now had small, menacing, beady eyes which had replaced the large fish eyes of its previous form. No eyelids were present. Instead, the fourth form had silver-coloured anti-flash defensive membranes that would cover the eyes and protect them. The skin was black, scarred and bumpy. The dorsal plates were black in colour and were considerably larger than those seen on the third form. The skin also possessed red scars and lesions which, due to the creature's nuclear origins, were reminiscent of keloid scars. At this stage, the arms were much more developed, though there wasn't much movement seen, apart from a few small movements in the fingers. The creature's chest bore a prominent, axe-shaped sternum. The legs were extremely large and muscular. Godzilla's feet were covered with many small vestigial toe claws, growing from their tops and sides in addition to the 5 main toes. Godzilla seemed not to possess a tongue, and its mouth was filled with crooked, sharp, large teeth, some of which were growing from the flesh outside of the mouth. The upper jaw would unhinge from the lower jaw, which split in two when this happened. While drastic physical changes were present, it must be noted that Godzilla had also developed new abilities. The creature now had a way of discharging stored-up nuclear energy from its mouth, known as atomic breath, from its dorsal plates which it used to down several military aircraft and drones, and also from the end of its tail. The tail was very long and had spiky plates running along its length. The tip of Godzilla's tail was a bloody stump and seemed to be covered in small twisted bones, like those from smaller creatures, which had formed what looked like a skull, a spare head at the end. While Godzilla was eventually incapacitated by an ingenious use of a coagulant used to freeze him on the spot, there is still every chance that he could reanimate and embark on his path of destruction once again. A creature as adaptable as Godzilla, with a unique biology based on radioactive mutation and hitherto unseen, won't be kept immobilized for long. Emotional turmoil is something that each and every one of us will go through at one time or another. Our short time spent on this earth will, for most of us, be rather a mixed bag, with feelings of joy, sorrow, anger, elation, rage, excitement, and boredom, among many others, all being a part of the human experience. Many people will attempt to avoid experiencing the stronger negative emotions, suppressing them, denying them, but eventually they always come to the fore. And these emotional responses occur for countless reasons. We all know this. And we also know that there are some people who just enjoy trying to get an emotional rise out of other people for their own amusement and gratification. Most of us will have experienced this at some point, especially if you've spent any amount of time online. But this type of thing happens frequently in the real world too. Have you ever been in a situation where it feels like somebody is just trying to upset you for the sake of doing so? I'm willing to bet that, sadly, most of us have. This concept of emotional sadism is one of the themes of the story I wish to talk about in today's video. This story is called The Mind Worm, and it was written by the American science fiction author Cyril M. Kornbluth back in 1950. It's a story that left quite an impression on me the first time I read it. I found it in this fantastic little collection of stories called the Boris Karloff Horror Anthology, which I was fortunate enough to get for a steal off eBay. But before we continue on with this video, I'd like to quickly ask that you please hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Thank you. The story begins in the late 1940s, where a young junior grade lieutenant and a pretty young nurse are watching an atomic bomb test taking place over the Pacific Ocean. They had been attempting to postpone any sort of relationship until a more appropriate future date. However, being as they were trapped together on the small, uncomfortable parts boat with no other nice young people aboard, things eventually took their natural course. This, while unseen and unfelt radiation from Test Able drifted all around them, onto them, through them. After falling pregnant, the nurse was discharged, and she never saw the handsome young JG ever again. After 9 months, she gave birth to a boy, and she promptly put him up for adoption. The boy grew up stupid, puny and stubborn, greedy and miserable. He is also said to be extremely ugly and, quote, an exceptionally unattractive looking kid. Already we can see a major theme of this story beginning to emerge, and that's the theme of alienation. The boy was abandoned by his parents as a baby and is deeply unpopular with the other orphans and with the staff at the orphanage too. No family, no friends. He is completely and utterly alone. In his own way, however, this small, unpleasant-looking child is quite special. He possesses an ability that no other boy or girl does, one that becomes apparent when talking to the orphanage's young athletics director. The boy says to him, "You hate me. You think I make the rest of the boys look bad." This wasn't something the staff member had ever said to him, nor would he ever say it, being keenly aware of the negative effects that harsh words can have on a child. The boy acquired this information through the use of his special ability, for he has the power to read minds. This greatly disturbs the staff member in question, and he reports this to the orphanage's resident doctor, who ends up having a similar encounter with the psychic boy. While examining the puny lad and trying to encourage him to eat his greens, he responds with a question. "What's neurasthenic mean?" which startles the doctor, for he was thinking at the time, quote, "We'd call him neurasthenic in the old days," although he never said this out loud. The doctor reports this to the director of the orphanage. The director is incredulous, but then thinks something which is quite interesting. Be damned if he's going to read my mind about Schultz Meat Market's 10%. With regards to this statement, no further explanation or context is given. He asks the doctor if anyone has shown any interest in adopting the boy, and of course, nobody has. "You know how people don't give a damn about anything but their looks," the doctor tells him. Of course, the director needs to shift these kids onto somebody, and deep down he knows no well-adjusted couple is going to want this weird, ugly child. He does know, however, that some couples will take any kid. The doctor, however, catches the real meaning behind his nonchalant wording. If you're going to wish him on some screwball couple that the courts turned down as unfit, I want no part of it. The director assures the doctor that he need have no part of it. He merely needs to inform him of which wing of the orphanage the boy sleeps in, so that he can begin making some phone calls. "West," grunted the doctor, leaving the office. The doctor isn't at all keen on this approach, but doesn't do anything to stop it either. The director is eventually put into contact with a couple, the Berrymans. They had been previously deemed unfit to foster any children, but the machinations of our crooked director ended up putting the undesirable boy into their care. He lasted only 3 months with the hard-drinking Mimi who alternately caressed and shrieked at him, and Edward who tried to be a good father to begin with before simply losing interest altogether. The boy then packed up his few meagre possessions and hit the road. He was, once again, alone. After being on the road for a short amount of time, he comes across a small group of homeless men who feed him some dirty bread and a few sardines from a can. He can read their drunken thoughts, which are described as muddled and stupid. But then their thoughts take a much darker turn, thoughts of doing things that no child should ever be a part of. Sickened and outraged by their plans, which the wayward child could read from their chaotic minds as they leered at him and began to approach, his outrage, fear, and disgust blended in him and somehow turned inside out, and one of the men was dead on the dry ground. As it turned out, the boy didn't just have the ability to read the minds of those around him, he also had the power of deadly telekinesis. The other hobos turned and ran, terrified by what they had seen the boy do. His incredible power was obvious even to these drunken would-be molesters. As he watched them run away, he made yet another psychic kill and noticed that he was no longer hungry after doing so. He felt quite sated and satisfied, and even noticed a difference in taste between the emotions of the 2 men he had killed. One was of heightened lust, and the other of heightened terror. They were different, but both had their merits. After discovering that he could satiate himself in this way, the boy began a new life as a nomad, a drifter, moving from town to town and making his way across the United States, staying for as long as he could in one place before arousing suspicion and having to move on. Over the course of his travels, he would put out so-called mind taps, which he utilized when looking for victims. He needed to find people with heightened emotional states. These were the ones who could provide him with the most sustenance. He had truly grown into a vile, parasitic creature. The ugly boy has grown into a truly ugly man. He spent his formative years institutionalized, being hated and kicked around by those around him. This has now manifested itself within him as somebody whose only purpose in existence is, like the malignant narcissist, to emotionally drain and destroy other people, vulnerable people, as a way to sustain himself. Although in our protagonist's case, he does this in the most literal sense. We get to see the creature feed several times throughout the story. He does this by inducing extreme emotional states in people after using his mind taps, which he casts across the area to find a suitable victim. One victim is an elderly widow named Sebastian Long, a passionate glass sculptor who was excited to start on a new project which he refers to as the Demeter Bowl. Demeter is the ancient Greek goddess of the harvest, a powerful deity indeed. The creature, the mindworm, shows up at Mr. Long's doorstep. When the elderly gentleman opens the door, the stranger insists on speaking to him, telling him it's urgent and it's about his Demeter Bowl. Surprised at a stranger knowing about this, he briefly takes his hand off the door. Unfortunately, this gives the mindworm the opportunity to barge his way in and start trashing the man's workshop. He then picks up a crescent wrench and, as Mr. Long looks on in horror, brings it down upon his beloved Demeter Bowl, the one he had spent much money on acquiring and years waiting for the free time to work on this passion project of his. As Kristin Bedoshi writes in the Fafnir Nordic Journal of Science Fiction and Fantasy Research, quote, "As the Demeter Bowl is symbolically smashed, the reader comes to understand that Kornbluth's transcendent creation wields power even over Demeter, the goddess who presides over the natural, sacred cycle of life and death." This encounter ends with Sebastian Long's heart bursting with sorrow and rage. The engraver's legs folded under him, and he fell to the floor, drained and dead. While this event demonstrates the violent and overtly cruel side of a narcissist, the mindworm's next kill showcases its more cunning abilities. While brute force and intimidation were used on Sebastian Long, the Mindworm ensnares Dolly Gonzalez using charm, modelling himself as her dream man and taking her out on a date, telling her that his name is Michael Brent and he works in advertising. He drives a new convertible and he paints himself as someone who can give her everything she has ever wanted. When Dolly reaches the peak of her romantic days, the Mindworm strikes. Her heart was nearly bursting with joy as she heard Michael Brent say, his arms tightening around her, "Darling, will you marry me?" "Oh yes, Michael," she breathed, dying. At least she died happy. After feeding on Dolly, the Mindworm sensed danger and cast out his mind across the city in search of it. He was shaken and he decided he needed to move on. He could read the minds of anyone, though if they spoke and thought in a foreign language, he would not be able to understand them. After hastily feeding on people at random, not having time to induce an emotional crisis in these victims, he moved on again, winding up in a town with a large Eastern European population. And close by was another town, one populated with Native Americans. Much of what he heard in the minds of the people here, that he could understand, were thoughts of violence, sadism, and abuse, prominent themes throughout this story. But a lot of it was unintelligible, but he managed to pick up the seemingly nonsensical "womp year" several times. This meant nothing to him. And so he went about his gruesome business, gorging on innocent, vulnerable souls. While the Eastern Europeans of this town seemed to be none the wiser about his presence, the Native American townfolk had begun to take notice of his activities, completely unbeknownst to him. The Native Americans were wise to his MO. They had 2,000 years worth of roots here, and 2,000 years of experience with such things. Womp year. They had closed off their minds to the Mindworm's reach and its influence. Wampyr. He could hear this in between the gobble 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 of the minds close by. Wampire. The Mindworm was suddenly startled awake in its hotel room. There was danger approaching, but he could not tell from what, or whom, or where from. Then, as several Native American men burst through the door, it dawned on him. He finally understood what the thoughts he had read had meant. Wampyr, Wampire, Vampire. They knew exactly what he was, and they had come to destroy him. The sharpened stake was through his heart, and the scythe blade through his throat, before he could realize that he had not been the first of his kind, and that what clever people had not yet learned, some quite ordinary people had not yet entirely forgotten. Now, what did you think about C.M. Kornbluth's The Mindworm? It's one of those short stories where I think you'll spot something new each time you read it. There's really an awful lot there in its 12 pages, from its running themes of violence and sadism, starting off with a literal weapon of war in the form of the atomic bomb, before moving swiftly on to loneliness, child abandonment and abuse, emotional vampirism, and the evil that some of us are capable of. And then there's the ideas that come to mind at the end of the story, those of ancient knowledge and wisdom, so often scoffed at by modernist-minded intellectuals. Now, we've gone through the story in a brief sort of way, but if you'd like to hear it in its entirety, you can listen to my audio reading here on YouTube. Hendrik Milhouse Larsen, a diplomat for the Axis Charter Worlds, teleports onto a new planet for his latest assignment. Larsen is here to establish a relationship with the primitive tribal people of the planet Genio Lael, known as the Genians. Genio Lael is said to be 10 light-years away from Earth, and so we know it exists within the Milky Way. Larsen finds a lush jungle planet, wild and hostile, yet breathtaking in its beauty, with splendid beaches and vast oceans teeming with unknown wildlife. But despite its beauty, the planet Genio Lael is a dangerous place to live, so dangerous in fact that most Genians die before their 27th brood day. The oldest known member of this race has managed to live to the age of 34, quite unheard of for these people. Everything in Genio Lale's jungles wants to kill you. It is unknown what age the Genians could live to under safer conditions, but it may be similar to, or even exceed, that of the average human being. Floating along in the skies of this world are so-called glory stones, massive flat slabs of an unknown type of stone, which drift along slowly with the aid of an unknown technology. These can be seen all across the sky. The atmosphere on Genio Lale isn't safe for humans without the use of a filter mask. The air contains genian pollen, which is psychoactive, a Class C hallucinogen, highly toxic, and is said to directly attack the back brain. The Genians, however, having evolved here, can breathe its air unharmed. The Genians are a humanoid race, with an anatomy that very closely resembles that of our own. They're bipedal, have 5 digits on each of their 2 hands, and 5 toes on each foot. They have pale white skin, and are completely hairless. They possess 2 eyes which are solid pink in colour, with no visible corneas, pupils or irises. They have a nose and a mouth with lips just like us, and they have 2 ears which are flat and barely protrude from their heads at all. They like to decorate their lower forearms and wrists with colourful mollusk shells, and have red tattoos of certain symbols on their arms, the meanings of which are currently unknown. Curiously, many animals that are present on Earth, such as cats, owls, rabbits, butterflies and elephants, seem to have a presence on Genio Lale and can be seen here. There are Genians visible in the background, and their god, known as the All-Spirit, is looking down at them. Why are there so many animals on this world that look like the ones we have on Earth? It isn't currently known what the truth behind this actually is. For now, we can only speculate. The Genians also have their own devil, an entity called Guarani the Trickster, who tempts them into committing immoral acts. The Genian body structure is much like our own, but not in every way. Their mating behaviour and physiology is quite different. Taken from Larsen's data journal, in which he documents his findings, an entry on this aspect of the Genians' biology reads, "Genians exist in 3 distinct genders, and live in interfamilial units or bond clans, in which all relationships take place. Mating occurs freely amongst all members of a bond clan, and offspring are automatically recognized as potential partners. It is highly stylized, following strict social codes. The female's vertebrae open to reveal a series of tiny follicular hollows. Implanted in these, in various stages of development, are the ova. In a formal ceremony, the bondmate removes an ovum with his lips, which he stores in one of the cheek pouches in his mouth, until he arrives at the body orchard. He then transfers the ovum to a korome tree, where it is fertilized and left to develop in the nutrient-rich interior of the tree. Gestation lasts for approximately 4 months. The tribal Genians are an intelligent and peaceful species, the most intelligent known to exist on Genio Lale. They possess telepathic abilities and are able to broadcast their thoughts to one another. They seem to live mostly on various fruits that grow within their jungle habitat. They've built a great many impressive structures, like the Suko Asher Kadarine, the House of the Running Still, an enormous temple for the All-Spirit made of pitch stone and granite. Similar structures can be seen strewn all across the planet. They do not possess any form of electronic technology, however, and are in awe of such things when they see them. They seem to live within homes that themselves are living and appear to be gigantic trees. At one point, when noticing Larsen's breather mask, one of the Genian people whose home he is visiting offers to grow the window closed. He politely explains that it wouldn't make any difference, but thanks her anyway for the kind offer. The planet is host to other life forms too, of course. Lesser beings over which the Genians have dominion. Briefly, we can see a type of underwater ant that lives on the beach, which is extending a thin lasso of silk in order to catch something called a wheelfish. There are other, more ferocious and larger animals that dwell in the jungles of this world, though no names or further information on these is given. The Genians also have managed to tame and domesticate some of the wildlife native to their world, most notably a species known to them as the Kashin. To us, however, we would be inclined to call them dragons. Taken from Larsen's journal, Kashin are large viviparous flying creatures used primarily as beasts of burden by the Genians. They exhibit a wide range of morphological features, including insectile, reptilian, mammalian characteristics, and exist in distinct social castes. Although naturally wild, the Kashin are domesticated by attaching a symbiotic partner organism, an imago lantrizant, into them at birth. The lantrizant provides hormones essential to the Kashin development, and by adulthood, the two creatures are perfectly coordinated, sharing the same urinogenitary tract and central nervous system. The lantrizant's regenerative hormones are also the source of the addictive drug hexocrine, known as Stripe or Corto Blue, which makes the Kashin extremely valuable to off-world traders. Axis records estimate that over 13,000 were slaughtered last year alone. The imago lantrizants are large black creatures that attach themselves to the Kashin's neck and then form a symbiosis with them for life. Just a quick warning, what follows are spoilers with regards to the origin of the imago lantrizant. You may recall that earlier it was stated in Hendrik Milhouse Larsen's data journal that the Genians exist in 3 distinct genders. These are males, females, and an unknown third. When this third gendered child reaches a certain age, it is taken into the Suko Asher Kadarine temple. The Genians then introduce some sort of gene virus into the body through unknown means, and then sew them into a specially made leather cocoon. Like a caterpillar, the child then pupates and transforms into something else, a lantrizant. These lantrizants are then attached to a baby Kashin, at which point it can be tamed by a Genian. The Kashin themselves are quite large and come in a variety of colours. The eyes are usually a solid red. They have 2 large wings, a spiny ridge that runs from their neck to the ends of the tail, and have patterning along their backs in a different colour to the rest of the skin. They are also equipped with razor-sharp teeth and 2 horns on their heads. There doesn't seem to be any evidence that these alien dragons are capable of breathing fire. The Kashin are piloted by the Genians, who attach themselves to their underside with what looks like a rope harness, and are then apparently steered around in the sky. The Kashin are the most revered of all creatures by the Genians, and it is forbidden to eat their flesh. While the Kashin are technically edible, eating them is said to lead to rather unpleasant consequences for the unfortunate diner, who will eventually, after experiencing frightening and overwhelming auditory effects over an unknown period of time, go completely mad. Curiously, the Kashin in Firekind are shown within the first part of the story as having 4 legs, then later on are shown as just having 2. This is probably just an oversight on the part of the artist. It happens. There are also the coil flies, wasp-like creatures that live inside of hives within tree trunks. But what's particularly frightening about the coil flies is that their swarms are far more organised than anything seen on planet Earth, as when they truly come together for an attack, they merge into the shape of one gigantic coil fly and are then able to act as a single entity. Alone, their stings cause immense pain, but together in this form, their capabilities are said to be unspeakable. The world of Firekind is deeply interesting and quite bizarre, as can be expected from a 2000 AD story. It has a rich world filled with strange beings and characters, none of whom I mentioned here so as to not spoil too much of the story itself. This video was simply made to look at these strange lifeforms of Geniolael and their biology. I did spoil a couple of things with regards to creature biology, but the story itself I have left mostly untouched so that you can check it out for yourselves if you want to. Firekind was actually suggested to me by someone who watched my Shakara video from a few weeks back, but sadly I've since lost track of the comment in question. If you're still around, dear commenter, please come forward so that I can give you credit for your suggestion. I found the world of Firekind to be very interesting indeed. The story itself is quite short, as only 83 pages, and while I would like very much to see more of this universe, it may actually be a case of less is more. Some things here are left vague, some things are unexplained, and quite a lot is left to your imagination. Sometimes what we need is a tale that's short and sweet, yet still has a good bit of mystery to it. In a place known as the Lost Land, which some refer to as the interdimensional sewer of the universe, a great many strange creatures reside. They come from every corner of time and space, and can be transported to the Lost Land randomly through portals or tears in reality. Humans reside here, as do several other species recognisable to us. These include creatures such as birds, fish, deer, monkeys, and wild boar. There are also those who come from our world, but from a different time. Dimetrodons, Triceratops, and raptors also live in the Lost Land, transported here from the prehistoric age. Giant insects, such as beetles and dragonflies, can also be seen. Whether they were brought to the Lost Land from prehistoric Earth or some other place is unknown. In this video, we'll be taking a look at the monstrous beings that are found in the Lost Land of the Turok universe. This video will be focusing on the first game in the series, Turok Dinosaur Hunter, released on the Nintendo 64 back in 1997, and fairly soon I plan on making videos about the biology of the sequels as well. But before we get into it, I'd like to ask that you please become a patron, as making these videos takes a lot of time and effort, and your support would be much appreciated. You can also become a member of my channel here on YouTube for just $1.99 a month, or you can buy some merch. Why not treat someone you love to a Beware the Q mug or t-shirt this Christmas? Anyway, that's enough shilling for one video. Let's get into it. So, what better way to do this than to talk about the strange and scary creatures of Turok in alphabetical order? That would make the alien infantry first. They have large, silver-armoured upper bodies and green, inverted lower limbs with a clear insectoid appearance. The grey-silver helmets that they wear leave their true physical appearance unknown, and it is a mystery as to whether they use it to protect against attacks or to protect themselves from alien environments and atmospheres. There is a built-in jetpack within their armour, which they use to ambush the enemy, and, if cornered or they lose the upper hand in a fight, it provides them with a quick escape. Their lower bodies are covered in green skin and scales. They're not particularly muscular, but they do seem to possess some sort of musculature on their small frames. Next up are the Ancient Warriors. These are tall humans that are painted head to toe with a design that resembles a human skeleton. It could be that these are ancient Aztec or Mayan warriors due to their skeletal face paint, though that's just a guess on my part. They have powerful physiques and are formidable in the art of combat. They are also very athletic and can drop from great heights with no adverse effects. The warriors have fashioned necklaces and wrist guards out of bone, and their minimal garments seem to be made out of either plants or animal hides. Some wield clubs and double-sided glaives, while others carry blowguns. Not all life in the Lost Land is organic, however. The attack robots are massive, bulky, robotic enemies. They have been seen in shades of red and yellow and are humanoid in overall appearance. They have a large band of armour across their chests and some on their legs. One of their arms is armed with a cannon, the other is a simple hand. They have 2 toes on each foot and are rather short in appearance when stationary, being only slightly taller than the player, though their height increases when moving. There are several different kinds of humans in the Lost Land, with the campaigner sergeants and campaigner soldiers being 2 further examples, as well as the previously mentioned ancient warriors. The campaigners are huge men with fierce tempers who care only for war. Some of them seem to be cybernetically enhanced for combat. And speaking of cybernetics, the Lost Land has actual cyborgs patrolling some areas. The standard cyborg is humanoid in appearance. They are plated in either red or green armour, and their faceplates have a single optical visor. Their voices are heavily modulated. The cyborg sergeants are much the same in appearance, but they have purple armour instead of red or green. The demons also have a humanoid form and are tall and muscular. They have only nostrils where their noses should be and possess a pair of glowing red eyes. Their heads are skull-like in appearance and are covered in small dark green protrusions. Their skin is green and rough and is able to withstand a large amount of damage. The demons' hands are peculiar in that they only have a thumb and a pair of fingers. Demons use equipment made of raw materials such as bone, metal, and other similar components. Their chests are protected by a skeletal, rib-like covering. Their shoulders are protected with shoulder pads made out of skulls, and their arms are protected by wrist guards. Their lower body is protected by sparse armour on their thighs, but also bulky boots and shin guards, all of which appear to be made of metal. The Demon Lords are a higher class of demon and appear similar in appearance to the common demon. However, they have 2 prominent horns growing out of the sides of their heads. They appear to be covered in green scales. They wear necklaces made of large teeth and spiked shoulder pads fashioned from skulls. They wear brown trousers with shin guards. The Dimetrodon, one of several creatures found in the Lost Land that originate from Earth, is roughly 3 meters in length and weighs around 150 kilograms. The defining feature of the Dimetrodon as we know it was the great semicircular ridge made of thin skin that was supported by elongated spines that extended from the vertebrae. The skull of the Dimetrodon is proportionally high, narrow, and triangular shaped when viewed from above. They also possessed a jaw filled with sharp teeth. They have a long tail and arched legs similar to lizards. There is also a mech variant, which has a pair of compact mounted machine guns attached to their spines. The Dimetrodon in the Lost Land do differ slightly from their real-world counterpart. Instead of having a large sail-like fin, they have a row of spikes on their back. If the Dimetrodon was first teleported to the Lost Land all those hundreds of millions of years ago, it could be that this form is an evolved version of this creature, though that's just speculation on my part. This is a speculative evolution channel though, and if I didn't do a bit of speculation every now and then, well, I wouldn't be doing my job, would I? The Lost Land doesn't just have killer fauna waiting around every corner, but also killer flora in the form of the aptly named killer plants. They resemble enormous pink flowers. Upon close examination, however, their petals are revealed to be lined with razor-sharp teeth. The plant itself has long vines and emerge from the base of the stem and is brownish green in colour. Leapers are quadrupedal reptilian creatures that have long tails and can climb or leap around. They come in a variety of sizes and colours. The smallest leaper has a yellow/dark brown coloration. The larger leaper has a yellowish-brown coloration with red eyes, and the adult has a brown-red coloration. Another variant of the larger leaper is entirely black with white eyes. All variants of leaper have large limbs and sharp claws on their feet. The Perlin are ancient creatures that have lived in the Lost Land for generations. While not the brightest of beings, they make up for their lack of intelligence with sheer brute force. Perlin are creatures with the appearance of a gorilla. Their height varies, and their mass is bulky, requiring them to move with a knuckle-walking movement. They possess lizard-like eyes and 3 fingers on each hand. Their backs are covered with scales. They also have 2 skin coloration variants, green with yellow undertones and dark green with brown. The raptors are bipedal dinosaurs that have been modified with robotic implants, turning them into bionosaurs, giving them more intelligence and making them more vicious and deadly. They have yellow eyes with no pupils. They have, at their disposal, sharp fangs, large claws, and a pair of curved claws on their second toes. They also have a large metal horn that is located on top of their maxilla. These raptors have 2 types of coloration, brown and grey. They came to the Lost Land, like other dinosaurs, from Earth. These dinos also come as an upgraded mech version, equipped with higher intelligence and a deadly plasma cannon. The sludge beast is a type of mutant crab that appears in the sewers of the Lost Land. This creature resembles a slug-crab hybrid, showing crustacean and land slug characteristics. Whether this is an evolved version of an earth crab or an alien creature that slightly resembles a crab is unknown. Its primary body colours are a deep sickly green and some brown, which covers its face and parts of its body. They have long, large arms with pincers and can be seen holding their claws above their heads quite often. Their eyes are reddish yellow. The subterraneans are giant sandworms. They have 2 large pincer-tipped arms used to slash at opponents, and 2 pairs of smaller clawed arms underneath. The only defining characteristic on what passes for their heads is a gaping mouth that splits into 4 jaws. Their carapaces are a greenish tan and brown, while their belly is greyish. And lastly, we have the Triceratops. Everyone knows what a Triceratops looks like, and in the Lost Land they're basically what you'd expect. They're bulky and quadrupedal. They have 3 horns on their heavily armoured faces. They're green in colour and are able to be tamed, as they are usually seen with a human riding them. Ever since science fiction first emerged as a genre, writers have been creating worlds and populating them with places, beings, and technologies of their own mental creation, and things that seem like bizarre and outlandish works of the imagination one day sometimes end up becoming just a part of everyday life not too far down the line. You've almost certainly heard the phrase life imitating art at one time or another, and this phenomenon occurs much more frequently than you might think. From 1902's Le Voyage dans la Lune predicting space travel decades before it occurred, to Ray Bradbury's 1966 novel Fahrenheit 451 predicting earbuds, and 1984's The Terminator predicting military drones, much discussion is made on how human works of sci-fi seem to get a lot of things correct in their dark prophecies. It should of course be noted that they also get many things wrong. 2022 has passed us by, and we haven't started eating Soylent Green yet, or at least, not that we know of. Nonetheless, The regularity with which the genre shows us things that don't exist yet, but will fairly soon, is quite remarkable. But there's one story, a short story from 1909, that doesn't seem to get much of a mention when these sorts of discussions come up, and it's one that I feel deserves far more recognition than it currently gets. This story did predict forms of technology that are now in regular use across the world, and we will touch on those shortly. But my main reason for writing and making this video isn't so much to talk about the technology itself, but about the profound effect it has had on the people who used it. This story is called The Machine Stops, and it was written by the English author E.M. Forster back in 1909. The Machine Stops is a story that points an eerily accurate and, quite frankly, horrifying picture of our present lifestyles, and our future lifestyles too. This story is, and I cannot stress this enough, an extremely important one, and one that I would encourage each and every one of my subscribers to read. A PDF will be linked in the description below. Now, I'll just take this opportunity to ask that you kindly hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Thank you. The story begins with Vashti. She's a woman living in a globalized future Earth. It isn't specified just how much time has passed between when the story was written and when it takes place, but based on just how different life is for Vashti than it is for us, it would seem to be quite a far-off future indeed, or perhaps not that far off at all. She, along with everyone else on Earth, lives inside of a hexagonal room underground, a sort of pod, if you will, which she has no need to ever leave, and all of her basic needs are taken care of by the machine, which controls every single aspect of every person's life automatically. There are buttons and switches for everything in her room. Food dispensation, playing music, fast delivery of new clothing, instant hot water, almost anything you can imagine, as these buttons and switches line all of the walls, floor to ceiling. Everybody in this future lives alone, in their hexagonal rooms. Any socializing they do is conducted remotely, through something described as a small round plate, which, despite its shape, is quite reminiscent of our smartphones, in that it can be used for making video calls. Vashti, at the beginning of the story, receives a video call from her son, Kuno. He asks Vashti for something quite unusual and, to the average person of this time, baffling. He asks to see her in person. Her reply is quite telling. "But I can see you," she exclaimed. "What more do you want?" This is a world populated with people who would much rather just stay indoors, where it's safe and everything is done for them, than actually go out and see a family member in person. Comfort and convenience are all that matter to most people in Vashti's globalized society. Real human contact, face-to-face contact, is just not the done thing. Any real-world activity is looked upon as primitive and pointless. As Vashti tells her son Kuno when he declares that he wishes to go to the surface of the earth to explore and see what lies above, it is contrary to the spirit of the age. Indeed, the so-called spirit of the age seems to be one of lazing around, consuming media in the form of lectures and machine-generated literature, and pontificating on ideas. Ideas seem to be at the forefront of the minds of Vashti and the friends she communicates with through the machine. Mulling over ideas, coming up with ideas, and discussing other people's ideas seem to be quite a popular pastime. But it soon becomes apparent to the reader that in Vashti's world nobody has any ideas at all, certainly no new ones, and their endless discussions about intriguing ideas are simply endless, dull and shallow second, third and fourth hand ideas, going back and forth, resembling the online echo chambers that we have today. Due to their wholly artificial lifestyles, where everything they eat and drink, and even the air they breathe, barely resembles anything real, the physicality of these future people has degenerated to an alarming degree. Vashti is described as being a swaddled lump of flesh when she is first introduced to the reader. Good nutrition was deemed pointless by the all-controlling machine, and when it came to the production of food, quote, "something good enough had long since been accepted by our race." While the character of Vashti indicates someone willing to blindly accept and submit to a gross and unnatural reality pushed on everyone by the technocratic whims of the machine, her son Kuno represents something different. Kuno is a man who is growing more and more ill at ease with the current state of things. He longs for adventure and wishes to explore the world above, despite the apparent dangers of doing so. He also, rightfully, questions aspects of the world he lives in. In response to Vashti's previously mentioned statement, "It is contrary to the spirit of the age," Kuno retorts with a question. "Do you mean by that, contrary to the machine?" which causes her to stammer and stumble. Kuno was, like everyone on the planet at this time, born in a public nursery. Babies in this world are born by natural means, but as soon as they are born, they are then taken away and removed to the public nurseries. Parents' duties of, said the Book of the Machine, cease at the moment of birth. Vashti decides, despite her fears, that she will journey from the southern hemisphere where her home is, to the northern hemisphere where her son was designated a home once he had come of age, to visit him as he had requested. He apparently has something urgent to tell her. Something he would rather say in person than through the machine, despite the conventions of the time. To do this, Vashti must board an airship that will take her on a 2-day journey across the planet. She takes only one possession along for the journey, one that brings her great comfort and solace: her Book of the Machine. The machine is man-made, as Kuno pointed out to Vashti before, but like many man-made concepts today, it has been deified and is beyond reproach. O machine, Vashti murmurs to herself in prostration before opening up the holy instruction manual. While on the airship that will take Vashti to Kuno, a nearby traveller drops his Book of the Machine, and he doesn't know what to do about it. His feeble attempt at reaching down to pick it up proves fruitless. He's too weak to do so, and not due to any serious malady or old age. He is simply too weak and too dependent on the workings of his room, which would normally pick up the dropped book and pass it to him. He is simply a typical man of this future age, too frail and passive to undertake even the simplest of physical tasks. His need to do anything himself, anything at all, has been taken from him by the machine, in much the same way that we in modern times have outsourced many of the everyday tasks our ancestors performed to technological apparatuses and organizations. And while most people in the modern world have become completely detached and disconnected from nature, no longer growing our own food or tending our own livestock, being totally reliant on central heating in the winter and air conditioning in the summer, the people of Vashti and Kuno's future Earth have gone one step further. Rather than being simply detached from nature and only seeing it as a resource to exploit, the people of the machine stops now genuinely hate nature. The very sight of the trees, the snowy mountains, and the twinkling stars above are so distasteful to Vashti and her contemporaries that they insist on the windows of the airships they travel on being completely covered up for the journey. "Cover the window, please. These mountains give me no ideas." When the cover of the window breaks and the cabin is flooded with natural light, Vashti and her fellow passengers are outraged and disgusted. They much prefer the artificial light and air provided by the machine in their hexagonal underground rooms. When Vashti eventually reaches the northern hemisphere, where Kuno lives, she discovers his reason for inviting her. Kuno, for the heinous crime of daring to explore the Earth's surface without jumping through the machine's petty bureaucratic hoops, is being punished with homelessness. In the eyes of the people whom the machine rules over, living without the decadent comforts of the machine is essentially a death sentence, and all of the propaganda being spread about the Earth's atmosphere being toxic only succeeds in reinforcing this idea. After Vashti's visit to see Kuno, some time passes. The almighty, all-powerful machine, the very same one which has been deified by people like Vashti who dismiss religion as primitive and then simply worship something else instead, like many in our present world, begins to fail. The infrastructure begins to degrade and ceases to work in the way that it should. The quality of the food provided drops significantly. The endless bureaucracy and the unsympathetic, soulless drones working for the Central Committee casually dismiss all complaints about the now much lower quality of life. The holy machine is stopping, something Kuno foresaw long ago. Their civilization is collapsing. At the end, the machine comes to a grinding halt. The inhabitants of the machine's society are plunged into darkness and violence breaks out. Vashti watches all of this in great horror from her room's door until most of them perish. Kuno has made his way to her, but has acquired serious injuries through the ensuing chaos. He is dying, but before he dies, he tells Vashti of the surface people who he has spent the past several years living amongst. They are a much purer people who live by their wits and hard work in natural communities, breathing the air that the underground people were always told is toxic. Before the gigantic airship crashes through the vomitory and into a ruined wharf, exploding in a titanic fireball and killing them, Kuno tells Vashti that the people on the surface have been waiting for the death of the machine, and now that this has come to fruition, they will no longer just be the homeless. They are humanity's true heirs. A fascinating story indeed, one that certainly captured my imagination. As I said near the beginning of this video, the fact that so much of what was written here in 1909 has come true, or is coming true, is startling. From the automation of many things now and possibly everything in the not too distant future, to our disconnect from nature, to the artificial everything consumed by the people in this story and their utter helplessness, I simply couldn't help but see the glaring parallels. But all of this is simply what I saw in the story, and I would certainly be interested in hearing what you think, so please leave a comment below with your thoughts. Also, I do in fact have an audio reading of E.M. Forster's The Machine Stops, performed by myself here on the channel. Hello there, and thank you for joining me on my cosmic safari. We'll be taking a journey across the Milky Way and through time itself to a distant future where brand new alien lifeforms have come into being on several different worlds. On one of these worlds, a planet where silicon is more prevalent than carbon, huge, unmoving crystalline trees sprout up from the ground. Carbon does exist here, but it's locked underground. As such, it's silicon that combines with oxygen to create the building blocks for these solid trees. When carbon forms a complex molecule that becomes a part of a living being, it forms flexible bonds, meaning that life on Earth, for example, tends to be pliant and flexible. However, when the same process happens with silicon in place of carbon, the bonds it creates are much stronger, meaning that the life forms made by them are much more rigid. These silicon-based trees are so rigid, in fact, that unlike trees on Earth, they do not sway at all, even during a violent hurricane. They remain as still as statues. What does happen during times of high winds, however, is their crystalline pods snap off and float away, spreading across a vast area. The pods then settle on the ground, and from them, new, solid trees emerge. This isn't the only world where silicon-based lifeforms exist, however. On another nearby planet, one with absolutely no atmosphere whatsoever, there are small, spiky, crystal-like creatures that float through the void of space, landing on this and many other such planets. On these planets, all of the water is locked into mineral compounds deep underground. They then land on the planet's surface and penetrate it with their spikes, which are then used to suck out all of the resources that they need. They can then grow and reproduce, and their young develop on the ends of their spikes, before snapping off and floating away. Life looks quite different on another nearby world, however. This planet does indeed have an atmosphere, and being 1,000 times the size of Earth, its gravity is 1,000 times stronger. Everything that lives here is flat and hugs the ground. One such creature is the alien land starfish. These creatures are extremely strong, muscular and durable. On Earth, they would weigh less than a gram. But on their homeworld, they carve deep grooves into the ground as they slowly move along trails of slime. Much of their precious energy is spent simply combating the immense gravity levels. When they do move, it's only once a day to reach a new feeding ground. When they sense that there is food nearby, they stay perfectly still and wait for it to come within reach. They then catch the unwitting prey item with their long, spiked tongue. On the same planet, or should I say high above it, are the living gas bladders. Under extremely high pressures, like those created by high levels of gravity, gases behave in much the same way as liquids. The different gases among the cloud systems of this world, which includes layers of methane, ammonia, and hydrogen, allow these large living gas bags to float and drift through the air in much the same way as a fish drifts and floats through water. These giant floating predators are filled with pressurized hydrogen. But a life of drifting aimlessly isn't necessarily an easy one, for their existence is a constant buoyancy struggle. Float too high, and the pressures will cause them to pop. Float too low, and they will die due to the toxicity of the lower levels. This constant struggle means that they must always try and save as much energy as they possibly can, and so allowing the air currents to carry them is their only option. Up here among the clouds, food is scarce, but even so, they must take care not to eat too much, or they may end up being too heavy to float at the correct altitude. The food that does exist up here comes in the form of smaller, wriggling animals that will unwittingly swim into the gas bladder's mouth, which is like a living cage that traps and then slowly eats its prey alive, using digestive juices. The living gas bladders are the rulers of the sky above their planet, but on an entirely different world where the gravity is extremely low, the Davatril reigns supreme. It's a half-plant, half-insect hybrid that is built very much like an Earth insect. Owing to their low-gravity environment, they grow to around 4 feet in height and are the undisputed kings of their world. Despite their unsettling appearance, however, the Davatril isn't carnivorous. It primarily feeds on plant life, however, this food is scarce. As such, it uses its wings, which are living plants, to absorb energy from the sun via photosynthesis. The Davatril has long eye stalks with bulging spherical eyes and insect-like mandibles. It walks on 6 legs and has 2 arms with pincers. The Davatril is big, but it isn't the biggest creature to be seen in this part of the cosmos. On Europa, one of Jupiter's moons in the far future, the ice giant roams the frozen tundra. It's about the size of an elephant. On its back is a cellulose fibre padding which helps to keep its blood and body temperature nice and warm. Its blood also contains antifreeze, and it has a very slow metabolism. The ice giant spends its time walking slowly on its 6 legs between the small pools of water found on this Jovian ball of ice, which are heated by thermal vents. Upon reaching one, it then lowers its large head into the water in search of fish. It then uses its special harpoon-like tongue to impale and capture its prey. It must be very careful when doing this, however, as the ice giant is so large and so slow that if it were to accidentally fall into one of these pools, it wouldn't be able to climb out again. The water on yet another Earth-sized planet in this system is home to different life forms. 9/10 of this planet's surface is covered with ocean, and as such, evolution here has taken a rather different turn. The shallow waters are the most fertile here and provide the best hunting grounds for predators, but they're also the rarest. As such, the pair-hunting sharks must travel far and wide to find food. Because these alien sharks need to travel such long distances to find sustenance, they have developed long, flowing pectoral fins and 2 dorsal fins, which allow them to glide along effortlessly, conserving energy for their long journeys. They get their name from their ability to hunt cooperatively, in pairs. This greatly improves their odds of catching food, exotic-looking fish which themselves have evolved to be extremely fast swimmers to escape from predators. The pair-hunting sharks have another trick up their sleeves, however. While they can communicate with each other via ultrasound, they have also developed the ability to roar loudly underwater. This confuses and disorientates their prey, allowing them to feed on an entire shoal of stunned fish quickly and easily. Thanks for watching the Bewarecast. If you enjoyed this video, then please hit the like button, along with the subscribe button and the bell icon to be notified of future uploads. Also, please feel free to leave a comment on this video with your thoughts and share it around with anyone who you think would find it interesting. I'd also like to encourage you to become a patron of mine on Patreon, where, for as little as £1, dollar or euro a month, you'll have access to exclusive bits and pieces from me, such as sneak peeks of my own upcoming speculative biology book, The Telescope, a study of alien worlds from Earth. The introduction chapter of The Telescope is available on there now, read by myself, so if you want to check it out, then just follow the link in the description. I would also like to thank my current members and patrons who could be seen here. This has been the Bewarecast, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.